February 26th, 2022. Before European markets opened, the US, the EU, the UK, Canada, France, Germany, and Italy issued a joint statement. $300 billion, the sovereign reserves of the Russian central bank, were frozen. Not seized, frozen. In 48 hours. No court order. Every central bank on earth watched. Your energy bill, your pension, your grocery prices, downstream of what happened next. Which ally moved fastest, and why it matters, is what most coverage has missed. The dollar became the world's reserve currency at Bretton Woods in 1944, and kept that position after 1971, when Nixon ended gold convertibility, because it was already embedded in trade contracts, debt obligations, and every central bank portfolio that mattered. For decades, the US used this position carefully. Then, it didn't. From Iraq in 2003 through Iran and North Korea, Washington spent roughly 19 years cutting adversaries off from dollar clearing access and SWIFT, the global financial messaging network, a practice economists call dollar weaponization. The weapon was targeted, used against governments the US was already at odds with. February 28, 2022 changed the category. The target was not a hostile institution. It was $300 billion in sovereign central bank reserves, the legal property of a G20 government, frozen within 48 hours. No court order. The implication was now visible to every central bank governor watching. Sovereign reserves held outside your own jurisdiction are not unconditionally yours. Within weeks, central banks began buying gold at a pace not seen since the 1960s. Most coverage asked whether China would de-dollarize. That was the wrong question. The mechanism by which a weapon creates its own replacement and who built it fastest is what the data shows. Between 2010 and 2021, central banks bought roughly 473 tons of gold per year, according to the World Gold Council's Gold Demand Trend series. In 2022, purchases hit 1,136 tons, a record going back to the 1950s. Then 1,037 in 2023. Then 1,045 in 2024, per the World Gold Council's Gold Demand Trends Full Year 2024 report, published February 2025. 3 consecutive years more than double the prior decade's average. That is not a market trend. It is dozens of sovereign institutions making the same policy decision at the same time, triggered by the same event. Those purchases are now embedded in the price of electronics, financial products, and gold-backed assets across your economy. The country that moved fastest was not China. It was India. Since March 2023, the Reserve Bank of India has repatriated 274 tons of gold from overseas vaults, per the RBI's half-yearly report on management of foreign exchange reserves. In early 2024, less than half of India's gold was held domestically. By March 2026, 77% sat inside Indian borders. RBI officials have cited the motivation was holding the metal as a safe haven asset under direct domestic control. India is a formal US strategic partner, not an adversary, an ally. Europe's answer, completed between July 2025 and January 2026, has been widely reported and almost universally misunderstood. What it actually reveals is where this story gets structurally significant. In March 2026, the Banque de France confirmed it had sold 129 tons of gold held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York between July 2025 and January 2026, replacing them with compliant bars purchased in Europe. The central bank's governor stated explicitly the decision was not politically motivated. It was a technical compliance upgrade triggered by a 2024 internal audit. That stated motivation is accurate. The outcome is political regardless. Every ounce of French sovereign gold now sits in Paris. Germany completed its targeted repatriation of 674 tons from Paris and New York to Frankfurt in 2017. Two of NATO's largest gold holders have taken major steps toward greater domestic control of their reserves, one citing geopolitics, the other citing bar standards. The adversary ledger is more direct. According to US Treasury Department Treasury International Capital data, China reduced its US Treasury holdings by $173 billion in 2022, $51 billion in 2023, and $57 billion in 2024. Holdings now stand near $693 billion, down from a $1.3 trillion peak in 2013. China's reported gold reserves per People's Bank of China monthly disclosures grew for 17 consecutive months through March 2026. India, France, Germany, China. Four major economies, independent decisions, one direction. The Federal Reserve's own 2025 paper cites a specific figure to argue none of this constitutes a meaningful shift. That figure is where the real argument lives. The Federal Reserve Board's 2025 edition paper on the dollar's international role reports its share of global reserves essentially unchanged at 58% since 2022 and concludes the system is holding. That figure treats willing holders and structurally trapped holders as one category. The countries with actual freedom to restructure, India, China, France, Germany, have all restructured. Whether that constitutes erosion or a manageable adjustment is where analysts genuinely disagree. The dollar is not being abandoned. It is being held, by some by choice, and by others while they quietly build the alternative. The weapon works. The question is for how much longer and against whom? The Federal Reserve says the reserve share is stable at 58%. The system is holding. Others argue the composition of those holders is what actually matters. Which position do you think the data supports? Leave your take in the comments. If you want analysis that goes below the headline number to what the data underneath it actually shows, subscribe. That is what this channel is for. The previous video on this channel, China built its own replacement, and its Vietnam, examined how Beijing restructured its manufacturing supply chain to reduce exposure to US tariffs. That is the industrial side of the same strategy this video examined on the financial side. The countries building alternative manufacturing bases are the same ones restructuring their reserve portfolios. Neither story is complete without the other. It is on the screen right now.